This is the WrestleBread Podcast, bringing you the latest news, recaps, and analysis of AEW and WWE. Get the unique perspective from a wrestling fan of over 25 years. Here's your host, Jaydee.
What's going on, guys? This is Jaydee here, and this is episode 48 of the WrestleBread Podcast. First off, I hope everyone is safe and healthy during this crazy time of 2020. 2020 has been a hell of a year, and we're only 3 months in. We already went through threats of World War III, Australia with their wildfires, Australia then flooding, and then now we have this coronavirus. And I have to say, I was one of those people who, said that it was similar to the flu, but not in the sense of downplaying it, but in the sense of how to prevent it. Make sure you wash your hands, sneeze and cough into your elbow. Make sure you're not touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Making sure that if you're sick, you're not, spreading it to the next person. And it has gotten crazy. It has now taken over the world, and it's here in Philly. So I live in Philly, and I knew that it was going to hit the U.S. because of how quickly things get spread. I mean, no matter what, people are going to travel. People are going to walk around the streets. People have this sense of, if you're sick, you just keep going type of mindset. So I knew that was going to hit the U.S. And then once I started hearing cases, and it was in New Jersey, it was in New York, it was here, it was there. And I knew it was going to be in Philly soon because cases started to pop up around Philadelphia. And then we had our first case in Philadelphia. I forgot exactly where. I think it was like someone in a hospital. And then it started to spread. I think we're up to 8 cases as of today, March 17th. And now we are on a 2-week shutdown pretty much. The schools are closed for 2 weeks. As of yesterday, 5 p.m., non-essential businesses are instructed to close. The government buildings are to close. The wine and spirits are closing today at 9 p.m. And they said the only things that's going to stay open are essential businesses. Unfortunately for me, I work in banking, so I am still going to work. Now, fortunately for myself, I asked for today and tomorrow off well before this whole thing even started. So I'm fortunate to have these 2 days off, but unfortunately, there's still people walking around like nothing is going on. There's people who are not washing their hands, not covering their mouth and everything. And shout out to everyone who still has to go to work through all this, especially people who work in the hospitals, people who work in the supermarkets, gas stations, a lot of the businesses that still have to stay open. Even our, the post office is still open. And someone had made a post that I saw on Facebook that, people who work in the post office have to deal with people who are licking envelopes, people who are not washing their hands and taking their mail to the mailbox, people who are sick, who, if the mailman needs something to sign, they have to interact with people on a daily basis. And even in banking, we still deal with people face to face on a daily basis. And the mayor and a lot of people are telling the elderly to stay home, don't get in contact with people. And I've been seeing a lot of elderly people coming into the bank, unfortunately, because they don't really use online banking. They don't use the debit cards. They come in to make their cash withdrawals and then they leave. So it's really sad, the state that we are in, that is as simple as, protecting not only yourself, but others. So it kind of sucks because I wasn't really concerned as far as how, I wasn't looking at it like, oh, I was looking at it, it's a strand of the flu, but then as more and more information is coming out, there's celebrities that have gotten tested positive. Idris Elba had tested positive for it and apparently had no symptoms, which kind of creeps me out. But regardless of how you feel of where it started, how you feel about it, the important thing is to protect yourself. If you feel sick, stay home. Cough into your elbow, sneeze to your elbow, especially when you're in closed spaces like public transportation. I have to take public transportation to work. And before this even started, I'm normally a clean person. I make sure I use hand sanitizer, especially when I'm at work, and wash my hands because we're dealing with money. And, people don't realize how dirty money can really get. I mean, there's people who pick up money off the ground, people spit on the ground, people walk on the ground. There's people who do drugs on money. There's people who, bleed, do all this other stuff, and then sit there and touch money. So I normally try to make sure that I wash my hands and make sure I don't spread anything to my family because I'm dealing with, money all the time. And so my kids, of course, tend to get the common cold. So now my son is showing symptoms of the common cold again before this really picked up. And I realized I didn't have a thermometer to take his temperature. Go to 3 different stores, sold out. Rite Aid had 1 thermometer left, and it was for $60. When this all started to break out, it was my time to go grocery shopping. And all I was trying to do was get enough food to last for 2 weeks. And people were in there buying toilet paper like the zombie apocalypse is coming. I don't get the whole toilet paper thing. If you really feel as though you need that much toilet paper for the next 2 weeks, you should really see a doctor because there's not that much toilet paper in the world that you need to hoard for 2 weeks. And then on top of that, a story came out of a guy who went around and brought 17,000 bottles of hand sanitizer with the intention to resell them on Amazon and eBay for a profit. eBay and Amazon took his ads down, and now authorities are getting involved, and now he is trying to donate the supplies. It just blows my mind the way that people react to, whenever there's a snowstorm or something like that, they just go out and hoard supplies, really not thinking for others, I have to say. And it's just crazy of how everything is going down. There's still people out and about, of course, in the city. There's people who still take public transportation. Downtown is still a little busier, of course. Neighborhoods, people still walking around. And I'm just really hoping that people kind of use caution because you never know who has it, because just like the flu, you don't really show symptoms until a couple of days afterwards. But before all this started, I was on the train and it was an Asian guy, not to be that person, but it was an Asian guy who was sneezing into his hand and then wipes his nose with that hand. And then there was a school kid, teenager, sitting behind him, coughing without covering her mouth. So before this whole coronavirus even broke out, I was instantly annoyed at how careless some people can be. This guy wipes his nose. He sits there. When he gets up, he's going to touch a bar or the seat in order to get up because he was a bit older. And someone walks onto the train not knowing what happened 5 minutes before they walk on, goes to touch the same bar, sits in that same seat. And then we have homeless people and we have crackheads that be taking the public transportation. So it's a lot of things that's going on. But all in all, just hope for everyone stay safe, everyone stay healthy. If you have to go to work like I do, please, I say a little prayer for you that, people aren't being stupid out there, which, as we always see humanity really knows how to show their stupidity. And with this, life has changed. NBA has postponed, I believe. I know the NFL is going as normal. The NBA had postponed their season. XFL postponed their season. A lot of bars and restaurants right now, in Philadelphia, the restaurants are takeout or delivery only. There's no dine-in restaurants. A lot of events is closed. I was thinking about going to, before this all started, of course, going to AEW Dynamite when it comes to Philly. That is no longer. They'll be, hopefully by that time, everything should be back to normal, but they did say that, no gatherings for the next 8 weeks. So looks like that will be canceled. Just getting together in large groups, you really can't do. You can't even really be sure about interacting with people one-on-one because you never know who has what. And speaking of things that are changing, now I'm going into wrestling. WWE has been filming their Raw and SmackDown shows at the Performance Center. First of all, SmackDown was weird because the weird thing was the wrestlers were acting like there were still fans in the arena instead of just like really adjusting to the reality of what's going on and talk to the camera. You don't even really need a mic, truthfully. But talking to the camera, especially for the women's tag team match, Sasha Banks and Bayley versus Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross. Nikki was sitting there chanting like leg C, like she was trying to get a crowd, going. And it was so weird, a bit cringy at times. Of course, because they don't really have much of an adjustment, they started to air a lot of matches. Like this past Raw, WWE aired the entire men's Royal Rumble match, which I've already seen before. We all know exactly what happened. So I started playing. I've been playing the Division 2 on PlayStation, so I just started to play that and kind of had that Raw as background noise at a certain point. Of course, yesterday was Happy Steve Austin Day, 316 Day, and Steve Austin came out. He was pretty funny. He, of course, played up to the fact that there was no crowd in the arena. And he did a bit with Byron Saxton, Byron giving a rating after every couple of sentences or points that Stone Cold made. Of course, it led to Stone Cold Steve Austin giving a stunner to Byron Saxton twice. And then Becky Lynch comes out, and Becky Lynch, I don't know how to feel about it. She arrived to the arena in a semi-truck, I think it was, or a monster truck. I forgot. But I don't know, she's not that exciting anymore. Sad to say. But SmackDown was kind of, Triple H made it pretty funny, but with SmackDown and Raw, it was just so weird. And the announcement came yesterday that WrestleMania will go on as usual, and it will take place at the Performance Center, which I understand. So I'm conflicted with that decision. I understand why they made that decision because they don't know what's going to happen. I wish they had postponed it because WrestleMania, especially the Raw after WrestleMania, it's the crowd that makes it. And you work so hard year round to have that WrestleMania moment. And you have to have that WrestleMania moment with the crowd, because the crowd cheering and, popping for certain moments, that's what makes it WrestleMania. And I wanted them to postpone it, maybe to June, or even not really July, but maybe earlier or late June. But you never know with this coronavirus, this may continue on because people are not understanding what's going on. There was a video that was posted, I believe on Twitter, of a beach in South Florida. And there was it was a lot of people on that beach, like nothing was going on. It's as if people don't watch the news or pay attention to what's going on in the world or something, or they just don't believe how bad the situation is. So this thing can continue on for a while because, like I said, people are acting like there's nothing going wrong and they're not being clean about it. It really puts them in a bind because if they go to postpone it and the situation is pretty much the same where they're limiting travel from other countries to the United States, there's still cases popping up. It'll really put them in a bind. On top of that, they have their storylines that they have to work on. Even though I feel like they can easily make adjustments to the storylines, they can, it would be hard to kind of drag everything out a little more. But this is going to be a very sad WrestleMania. I feel bad for Drew McIntyre because he worked so hard during his entire career to have this moment, this opportunity to main event WrestleMania, and there won't be no fans there to enjoy it with him. His family, won't be ringside. He won't be able to, win the title and have the fans pop and cheer and him, point to the WrestleMania sign and get the confetti. We probably won't get like the extreme, WrestleMania entrances because there won't be any fans there. So it's going to be a very sad WrestleMania, I have to say. As there's some people who saying they won't tune into it. I'll still watch it, but it's just going to be so weird, so hard. Of course, more likely TakeOver is still going to happen. I haven't been able to watch NXT this week, so I didn't really wasn't able to really get a good recap of it. I did watch AEW Dynamite, and it was a good episode, but some people are just like, they've like the tag team match with Kenny Omega, Hangman Page, and the Young Bucks is really good. I love how the tag teams are being treated in AEW, that, they put on the good matches and everything. For people to say that was the greatest tag team match of all time, it's like, first of all, there's too many tag teams and feuds to go through in order for you to say that was the best of all time. It told a great story. It was a good match, but I wouldn't say it was the greatest of all time. Not when you have the Dudleys versus Edge and Christian versus the Hardys, TLC match going on. So no, I can't agree with that statement that it was the greatest tag team match of all time. AEW still has its issues. I just wish that they just take just $10,000. I swear it shouldn't cost more than $10,000 to update their entrances. Some of their entrance music is fine, but those graphics, it's like an intern from college did that. I feel like I can do a better job creating better graphics for the wrestlers' entrances than what they've been using. It's pretty much the same template that you see from like Adobe After Effects or something. You can really pay someone good money to put out better graphics than that. You have enough weeks. They're coming up to almost a year of being out, and you could at least put together some highlights of their matches or something and then do the mini graphic. But and then you can definitely pay someone to do better music as well. It kills me to see their graphics and some of their music and, and know that there's a lot of money being pumped in. The finishes of some of AEW Dynamite's matches is a bit underwhelming as well. Still, that's one of my biggest pet peeve is that they have these matches a lot of times very exciting, and then it seems like every single time it's a bunch of finishes and near finishes, and then it ends up with a roll up out of nowhere, and then that's the end of the match. It just gets very underwhelming. It really does. I said last week that I was going to go through the WrestleManias because, I was feeling excited that this is WrestleMania season and this is normally WrestleMania lands the week of my birthday and it's going to be a big celebration and everything. And now with the coronavirus and now WrestleMania is going to be without a crowd in a performance center. It's just very underwhelming. But I understand that the show must go on, and I understand that WrestleMania has to happen in order to have the storylines be in sync, but it's just going to feel very weird without an audience, because the audience is what makes the moments happen. I feel bad for people like Drew McIntyre, who worked hard all year to finally get a WrestleMania moment, and it will happen in front of no one. What I'm hoping would happen is they at least have some of the NXT people in the crowd, maybe even family members or staff in the crowd to at least have some type of reaction so it's not completely quiet. We all know that we're going to hear every single spot called by John Cena because he doesn't know how to call a spot quietly. And it's just going to feel very weird whenever, this happened or that happened and there's no one to respond to it. So what I decided to do, like I said last week, I'm going to go through the WrestleManias, not really in depth, but I'm going to go through maybe a match or something that not a lot of people really concentrate on. Everybody knows certain things from each WrestleMania, but I'm going to go over little things that not a lot of people knew about or even talk about, probably. So going through this week, WrestleMania 1 through 10, I normally call this the starter years. The WWE used a lot of celebrities to get people to watch it. For the first WrestleMania, we actually had Mean Gene Okerlund singing the national anthem. Apparently the singer who was supposed to originally do it never showed up. But they never said who it was supposed to be. For this WrestleMania, everyone remembers that the main event was Hulk Hogan and Mr. T going against Paul Orndorff and Rowdy Piper. People remembered Wendy Richter with Cyndi Lauper, who went against Laylee Kai with the Fabulous Moolah by her side. But something that people don't really talk about, there was a match between Andre the Giant and Big John Studd, which was career versus $15,000 body slam challenge. Andre the Giant was supposed to body slam John Studd or defeat him in a certain period of time. And if he couldn't do it, then if Andre the Giant could body slam Big John Studd, he would win $15,000. Or if he failed, he would be forced to retire. Eventually, Andre the Giant did body slam him to win the match. And Andre the Giant collected the prize money and started to throw it out into the crowd. And then Bobby Heenan quickly grabbed the bag and then ran off. That match lasted for a good 5 minutes, but they had they had Mr. T, Muhammad Ali, Cyndi Lauper, Liberace, and the Rockettes in this one. So some of these celebrities, especially if you weren't alive during this time, were famous celebrities during that period of time. You can Google any of these names to really get more in-depth information about them. So going on to WrestleMania 2, WWE decided to do something different for this WrestleMania this was actually broadcast from 3 different arenas. So they had the event in New York, then they had it in Rosemont, Illinois, and then they had it in Los Angeles. And then each venue had its own card with its own main event. It was a tragedy, of course, because I'm not quite sure how it was handled back then, but we all remember how they did one of the Raw reunions where one took place in Madison Square Garden or somewhere, and I forgot where the second one took place at. But they literally had one crowd sitting silently, not really watching anything, and watching events that was going on at another place. So everybody talks about Hulk Hogan going against King Kong Bundy, which was a steel cage match for the WWF World Heavyweight Championship. Something that I didn't know about was there was a WWE versus NFL Battle Royal. Not a lot of people talk about it. And they didn't have a lot of people from the NFL in this Battle Royal. They had more of WWF superstars than that. So with this WrestleMania, they had a lot more celebrities. They had Mr. T again, Ray Charles, Ozzy Osbourne, Elvitra from the Addams Family, Joan Rivers, Carl Banks, Joe Frazier, just to name a few. But of course they had a lot more because they had this Battle Royal going on. So for the Battle Royal, they had Claire Peller, who was famous for a commercial back then, Where's the Beef? They had Dick Butkus from the Bears as a referee, Ed Too Tall Jones from the Cowboys as a referee as well. And as far as NFL people that was there, they had Jimbo Covert from the Bears, Harvey Martin from the Cowboys, Ernie Holmes from the Steelers, Bill Fralick from the Falcons, Russ Francis from the 49ers, and then William the Refrigerator Perry from the Bears. As far as wrestlers, they had Pedro Morales, Tony Atlas, Ted Arcidi, Dan Spivey, Hillbilly Jim, Bruno Sammartino, King Tunga, Iron Sheik, Killer Bees, Big John Studd, Bret Hart and Jim the Anvil Neidhart, and Andre the Giant. So I didn't expect them to have a lot of big names in this Battle Royale as well. Of course, this event took place in the Illinois portion of the event. So, of course, the crowd goes crazy for the Refrigerator and for Dick Butkus too. So it really came down to Big John Studd, Andre the Giant. No, not Big John Studd. It came down to the Refrigerator, first of all, was eliminated by Big John Studd, which the crowd, of course, booed. And then the Refrigerator wanted to give John Studd a handshake, which he does. And then the Refrigerator pulled John Studd over and eliminating him. This Battle Royale was won by Andre the Giant after he took out Bret Hart and Jim the Anvil Neidhart. And, looking back at it, especially knowing what he went through at that time, you could see he was in a lot of pain. I noticed that he tends to use the ropes to kind of hold himself up a lot. And it was I felt a bit sad watching it because knowing that he went through so much pain and he had to sit there and wrestle in front of all these people over and over and over again. It's just kind of, a bit sad to look at. So now to WrestleMania 3, the one that everybody talks about with Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant and him body slamming Andre the Giant. Everyone talks about that moment. The celebrities that was at this one was Bob Uecker, Aretha Franklin, Alistair Cooper, and Mary Hart as well. A match that a lot of people talk about too, but everyone, always concentrate on the Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant, was the Intercontinental Championship between Ricky Steamboat and Randy Savage. Now, this match, if you ever want to introduce wrestling to someone who never seen it before and you want to show them like one of the old time classics, this is one of the matches that you show them. This match was storyline heavy. You had Miss Elizabeth, of course, the first lady of wrestling. And you had Ricky Steamboat, which the crowd was totally behind. I believe this was his first title win, done on the big stage. And he had George the Animal Steel in his corner too, who kind of like went with Miss Elizabeth. I think Miss Elizabeth ended up being, escorted out in this match. I'm not quite sure. Some of these matches kind of blend in for me. But this was a great match. Ricky Steamboat won the match, of course, and won the title. But if you ever wanted to check out a match, this is the match. This match was actually the longest match on the card at 14 minutes. Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant only lasts for 12 minutes as well. So going on to WrestleMania 4, this was a bit of a weird one. This WrestleMania was mainly about the vacated WWF title. It was vacated because Ted DiBiase wanted to buy the title. He didn't want to actually wrestle and win for it. He wanted to buy it. Andre the Giant won the title at one point and then sold it to Ted DiBiase. Then the belt was stripped from him by then the president, even though he wasn't technically the president. But storyline wise, he was called the president, and that was Jack Tunney. Now, Jack Tunney only appeared on screen when something got serious. It wasn't like, with the McMahons where they come out and do like the storyline and really get into the nitty and gritty. He normally comes out, he goes to make a decision. So for this instance, he decided to vacate the title, and WrestleMania 4 was all about a tournament for the title. A lot of people don't really talk about WrestleMania 4 because not a lot of people liked WrestleMania 4. They felt as though that it was too long. This WrestleMania had 16 matches, no pre-show. So it was 16 matches just for the title. Some people felt as though some of the matches could have been, skipped out. But the main event of it, the biggest thing that everyone kept talking about was Andre the Giant versus Hulk Hogan again, because at this point, Andre the Giant had aligned himself with Ted DiBiase. With this tournament, you had Randy Savage, who went through pretty much each round. So he wrestled 4 times at this pay-per-view event, along with Miss Elizabeth, who actually had 4 different outfits as well. So the main event of this was Randy Savage with Miss Elizabeth and Ted DiBiase versus Andre the Giant. And this was storyline. Andre the Giant was, interfering behind the referee's back. You see Randy Savage whisper something to Miss Elizabeth and she runs off. She goes and gets Hulk Hogan, and with the assistance of Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage wins the title. And this was the scene where you see Macho Man put Elizabeth on his shoulder with her holding the title. So you probably seen that image a lot of times. Now, this pay-per-view event took place at Trump Plaza, which is now known as Boardwalk Hall. And of course, Donald Trump was in the crowd. You also had Bob Uecker, Vanna White, who he was obsessed with. You had Robert Leach and Gladys Knight singing America the Beautiful. This event started off the mega powers of Randy Savage and Hulk Hogan. This is what started it. So going on to WrestleMania 5, which also took place at Trump Plaza. This was the first time that a WrestleMania took place at the same event back to back. So with this one, we had Run DMC, who did a WrestleMania rap, and it was pretty good. That was pretty good. You had Morton Downey, who had you saw this scene where he was smoking cigarettes and kept blowing smoke into Roddy Piper's face, and you see Roddy Piper take a fire extinguisher and use it on Morton Downey. And you also had Donald Trump in the crowd, who they interviewed as well. Now, the big thing about this event was Hulk Hogan going against Randy Savage with Miss Elizabeth in the neutral corner. Hulk Hogan wins the match, of course. You had Rockin' Robin, who was the was a former women's champion who sung America the Beautiful. Wasn't good at all. Interesting enough, so there's a few things that I found interesting that probably not a lot of people knew about. So these WrestleManias were before when I started watching. So I missed a lot of things. First of all, I missed Jake Roberts cutting an insanely good promo against Andre the Giant. You also had the Blue Blazer, who was wrestling at that time, Owen Hart, of course, going against Mr. Perfect. And then you had a WrestleMania 5K run that they actually had. They had Mr. Fuji, who quote unquote ran it, to kind of show that he's in really good shape, and that his tag team at the time, the Powers of Pain, would be able to defeat Demolition. You also had Tony Schiavone on here as a backstage correspondent. And then the one thing that, the match that I watched was the Strike Force versus the Brain Busters. And the Strike Force was Tito Santana and Rick Martel, and the Brain Busters was Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard, which I didn't know was a tag team called the Brain Busters. I watched that match. This match was almost for 10 minutes, and the Brain Busters kind of reminded me of the Revival. They were very hard hitting. They won this match because Rick Martel turned his back on Tino Santana and walked away. But this was a bit of a weird WrestleMania, I have to say. So going on to WrestleMania 6, this was called the Ultimate Challenge WrestleMania. They didn't have as many celebrities at this one. They had Steve Allen and Robert Goulet, who sung Canada's national anthem. This took place in Canada. We had Mr. Perfect, who still had an undefeated streak until he faced Brutus the Barber Beefcake, who was wearing some now I've seen the end of Brutus the Barber, and I haven't realized until now that his tights are really elaborate. For this one, the side portion of his tights was see-through, except for basically the crack of his ass. With this one, of course, the main event was the Ultimate Warrior going against Hulk Hogan, title for title. The Ultimate Warrior won that. But I watched the match, I watched two matches on this one. I watched the match of Jake the Snake versus Million Dollar Man Ted DiBiase. Jake the Snake, of course, cutting a very good promo. Something even crazy that happened during this match, the crowd did the wave. And they did the wave for a good minute or two. It wasn't that the match was boring, it was that the crowd was that crazy. So you kind of see that, the internationals are, when it comes to WrestleMania, they take things as fun as they can. But even the commentators, which was Gorilla Monsoon and Jesse the Body Ventura, talked about it. You see the camera kind of pan out and you see them doing the wave. And they were doing the wave on the lower level of that arena and on the top level of that arena as well. But the match that kind of made things famous was the match of Dusty Rhodes and Sapphire going against Randy Savage, who considered himself King Savage, and Queen Sherry. Now, they brought out Miss Elizabeth out to the match, and the crowd was so crazy for Dusty Rhodes and Sapphire. Now, this match wasn't so technical or anything. Sapphire, you can tell, didn't really know how to wrestle. She tried though, but it was, as far as storyline wise, because, Dusty Rhodes was known as the Common Man and Sapphire was the Common Girl. They did cut a promo beforehand, and it brought a smile to your face. And you can clearly see how Cody Rhodes kind of fed off of how much of a baby face that his father was, that kind of drew the crowd into him. But that was a fun match to watch. So going on to WrestleMania 7. Now, WrestleMania 7 was the WrestleMania where Sergeant Slaughter turned his back on America, and it was him going against Hulk Hogan for the World Heavyweight title. This was The Undertaker's first WrestleMania, the start of the streak, as he went against Jimmy Snuka. But the match that I watched was the blindfold match of Jake the Snake Roberts going against Rick Martel. If you think, what you think of a blindfold match went exactly the way this match went. Both men didn't know where they were. It was just mainly, it was two people walking around with their hands out like two toddlers starting to walk. Jake the Snake Roberts really using the crowd into it by pointing around the ring, and then the crowd was like, no. And as soon as he pointed to Rick Martel, they all screamed yes. So this was basically a match to kind of draw the crowd in, especially the kids. Kids were the loudest in this match. Of course, Jake the Snake Roberts defeated Rick Martel. He eventually did his infamous DDT finisher and won the match. Going on to WrestleMania 8. Now, this is the last WrestleMania before I started watching it. I watched SummerSlam later on this year. You had the main event of Hulk Hogan versus Sid Justice, but that wasn't for any type of title. It was because that was the biggest feud going on at that time. Now, we had a match that I didn't even know happened between two of my favorite tag teams at that time. The National Disasters, which was Earthquake and Typhoon, going against Money Inc., which is IRS and Ted DiBiase. I liked both of those teams. They went against each other for the WWF Tag Team Championship. You also had, this was Shawn Michaels' first singles pay-per-view match. This was after the scene where Marty Jannetty was a coward and tried to jump through the window at Brutus the Barber Beefcake's barbershop that a lot of people kind of saw. But basically, and to tell the truth, Shawn Michaels turned his back on Marty Jannetty by driving him through the window. And then he aligned himself with Sensational Sherry, who went to sing his first song that everyone knows of when he became the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels. But this WrestleMania, they had a promo done, and this featured a match between Tatanka and Rick Martel. Tatanka is actually a Native American, and Rick Martel cut this promo that was towing the line of racism, I have to say. He was saying that he was going to go out and disinfect, and he talked about, Native Americans a little bit. I mean, of course, at that time it was acceptable, but if he had cut that promo now, Twitter would have went crazy. So then after that is WrestleMania 9. Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot to mention celebrities. So in WrestleMania 7, the celebrities then was Carl Banks, Willie Nelson, Alex Trebek, and Donald Trump. And then for WrestleMania 8 was Regis Philbin, Marla Maples, Reba McEntire, and Ray Combs. So going into WrestleMania 9, this was the first WrestleMania that I watched. I started watching wrestling at SummerSlam before this one. So this was my first WrestleMania. This took place at Caesar's Palace. And of course, because it took place at Caesar's Palace, WWE thought it was a great idea to do a whole theme of, Caesar and all that stuff. So they had everyone wearing togas. They had Jim Ross, who was debuting at WrestleMania wearing a toga. They had Mean Gene wearing it, and Howard Finkel, who they were calling, Maximus Finkus or something like that. It was something really, really weird. Or Finkus Maximus. And Randy Savage was on commentary too. So I was already a Randy Savage fan because that was the first match that I ever seen. And then I was an Undertaker fan at this time. A lot of people felt as though this was one of the worst WrestleManias ever. This had no celebrities unless you're counting the guy who played Caesar and the woman who played Cleopatra. That was pretty much was it. And this was actually one of my first times seeing Hulk Hogan as well. So I haven't seen him during the whole previous time with the Mega Maniacs. No, not Mega Maniacs, the Mega Powers or anything. So I only knew him from starting the Mega Maniacs when it was him versus Brutus Beefcake when they were going against Money Inc. And I was a fan of Money Inc. because I loved Ted DiBiase's theme song. So this was my first look at Hogan. So the thing that not everybody talks about mainly, but it was the main event of Yokozuna versus Bret Hart. And then this was considered one of the worst WrestleMania matches for The Undertaker because it ended in disqualification. Giant Gonzalez, if you go Google him, if you've never seen him before, the weirdest outfit, it made me uncomfortable to look at as a 9-year-old because I guess he was supposed to be like a caveman, but they spray painted on his outfit and it was very weird and uncomfortable to look at. But during The Undertaker's match, he was taken out. They used, I forgot what it was that they quote unquote used to take him out, but he passed out and they ruled the match as a disqualification. The thing that a lot of people talk about, also, they had Lex Luger versus Mr. Perfect. Lex Luger had women walking out in thongs, literally thongs, to hold up a mirror for him. But the match that, people talk about, like I said, Yokozuna versus Bret Hart. And this was my first look at Hulk Hogan and probably one of the reasons why I did not really care for him at that time, was that after Yokozuna defeated Bret Hart, Hulk Hogan comes out to check on his friend. And then Mr. Fuji challenged Hulk Hogan to a match with the title on the line randomly. Cause Hulk Hogan mentioned he wants to face whoever wins the title. And then Hulk Hogan's looking around like, oh wait, should I do it? Should I do it? Bret Hart told him to go ahead for whatever reason. And then he goes in, they go to throw salt in his eyes, but they missed and hit Yokozuna. He then, knocked him down and then did a drop kick and then won the title, which I was like, what the heck is this? I didn't really like it. So I wasn't the biggest Bret Hart fan, as I said before, but I had a respect for Bret Hart, So Bret Hart lost the title to Yokozuna, who I wasn't a fan of either. And I definitely wasn't a fan a couple of years down the road when he took out Gray Undertaker. But when Hulk Hogan came in and just kind of took the title, I was like, what is this? Like, how did he get a title shot out of nowhere? Because keep in mind, apparently he was gone for a whole year. And I believe it had to do with the steroid scandal or something like that. I forgot exactly the reason why. But he was gone for a year. So when I started watching wrestling, he wasn't there. He kind of came along. I believe it was that same year back in February when he helped out Brutus the Barber Beefcake, and then they became the Mega Maniacs, and it was in red and yellow. But like I said, I was a fan of Money Inc. because I really liked that song. I really liked Ted DiBiase's song and his laugh too. So that was my first look at Hulk Hogan, and I really didn't care for him since. So going on to WrestleMania 10. WrestleMania 10 actually had celebrities this time. It seems like WWE learned their lesson, decided we're going to put some celebrities back into this bad boy. So they had Burt Reynolds, Jennifer Garth, Little Richard, Donnie Wahlberg, and Cy Sperling as well. Now the match that everybody talks about with this one was the ladder match of Razor Ramon versus Shawn Michaels. This was the first ladder match, if I'm not mistaken. You had Bret Hart going against Yokozuna again as well. At this time, Hulk Hogan left the company, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, Hulk Hogan left the company. You also had Yokozuna going against Lex Luthor. You had Earthquake going against Adam Bomb. Alundra Blaze going against Leilani Kai for the women's championship. Men on a Mission, if you haven't seen their entrance, go check it out. Men on a Mission with Mabel and Mo, also going against for the tag team championship. But the match, one of my favorite WrestleMania matches, was Owen Hart versus Bret Hart. Owen Hart, God rest his soul, they had the storyline where Owen Hart felt as though he was in the shadow of Bret Hart because Bret Hart, getting all these title matches and everything. He was the little brother. And he was disappointed at the way Bret Hart would carry on. And so it led to this match. Now, I was a fan of Owen Hart at this time, even though he was considered the quote unquote heel, because I understood, you're the younger one and you feel like you're in the shadow of your older sibling and you want to be able to like break out on your own. Not that I had like a big issue with my older brother and sister, but they were a lot older than me and I was just a baby and, you know how it is when you got siblings. So I felt for Owen Hart. So I was kind of cheering for Owen Hart in this match. Owen Hart won the match, which I was happy with. But this is another match. If you want somebody to check out a wrestling match and they never seen wrestling before and you want to show them like a technical match, this is the match that you should have them check out. This was a straight up technical match. Of course, they were brothers, so they kind of knew each other very well and was able to knew what the other one was kind of thinking. And it was kind of cool to have the younger brother, get put over by his older brother, basically. And like I said, that was a great match, I have to say. So that's an overview of the first 10 WrestleManias. The next 10 were, I considered the Attitude Era ones, basically. You had the beginnings of Stone Cold, the rise of Stone Cold during this one. You had Hulk Hogan, coming back to go against The Rock at at WrestleMania 18. You also had, ECW, no, not ECW yet. This is when WCW kind of came over to WWF. And so I'll be going through those next 10, WrestleMania 11 through 20 next week. And then you have WrestleMania 21 through 30 the following week, which was kind of basically, at this point, it was starting to get to the PG era. It kind of led into the rise of John Cena and everything. And then I'll be going through 31 to 35, which was the Roman Reigns era that a lot of people did not like. So that's it for the WrestleBread podcast. Thank you so much for listening. This episode was coming out a little later than normal because I started recording and I thought I lost my recording, and come to find out I didn't lose my recording. So I kind of recorded the first part on Tuesday. So you'll hear me kind of talk a little bit as if it's a Tuesday. And now I'm finishing this up on Wednesday. So thank you so much. Be sure to check me on Twitter at Jaydee Talks. That's JAYDEE Talks, and follow the podcast at WrestleBread as well. Let me know your thoughts of what's going on with what they're doing for WrestleMania, how it's going to take place at the Performance Center without a crowd. And I hope everyone is doing well with the coronavirus going on around. I had took off these past 2 days because I had the intentions of cleaning my house. And now with, everybody buying up everything, I decided to kind of chill with my family, play some Division 2, play some PlayStation. And now I have to go back to work tomorrow. And so saying, for those who still have to work during all this, especially the people in the hospitals, please stay safe. Please make sure everyone wash your hands, cough, sneeze into your elbow, and stay safe. And I'm hoping that this whole coronavirus situation will be dead in the pan within a month, and that we'll be looking back at 2020 as just a crazy start of the year. And hopefully the rest of the year will be a heck of a lot better because of all that we went through these past 3 months. So until next time, guys, peace.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Check us out at WrestleBread.com and subscribe to WrestleBread on YouTube for more breaking news and JD's opinions.